evening, depending on where you are in the world. This is Carla from Rehan Allahwala's World of Connections, and I am here to speak with Carly Grace Herrera, and she will explain more about her name and the pronouns in a few minutes. I want to remind you that this show, like all of my shows, is sponsored by the Institute of Peace, which is an online organization promoting peace one conversation at a time. Carly, welcome. Can you please introduce yourself?
Okay. Thank you so much, Carla, for having me here. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to speak to your community. My name is Carly Grace Herrera, and as Carla mentioned, my pronouns are they, them, theirs. And I don't think there's much of an explanation around that other than that's my name and those are my pronouns. And I am the lead coach at Carly Grace Coaching, which is spiritual coaching as well as the traditional model. It's really encompassing the multi.
Carly, excuse me, can you talk a little louder? Your voice seems to be a little quiet.
Yeah, maybe I could get some headphones. Is this good? Is this better? I'm bringing the computer.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm bringing the computer a little bit closer. So my name is Carly Grace. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I am the coach at Carly Grace Coaching. I have been serving the community since 2016, serving sensitive souls who are looking to find their voice, to embody the cosmic self, which really means to feel like they belong, to feel connected and empowered to live this life, to navigate the spaces and the systems that aren't necessarily designed to support them. For highly sensitive souls, sometimes it could feel pretty claustrophobic or be very draining to navigate society and be connected to other people when we don't necessarily speak the same language. As a sensitive person, I'm getting the stimulus and I'm understanding the information on all the layers. So you and I are having this conversation, but I'm also hearing the conversation with your body. I'm hearing the conversation with your energy. I'm hearing the conversation that what are the stories and the things that are showing up within you. And so there's so much information and stimulus that sometimes it can be really overwhelming. And when you're speaking for the first time, people that have natural spiritual gifts or have been activated as a young child through trauma, they have a tendency to leave their body. So through my coaching style, I help them to create a sacred space and learn how to speak sovereignly and be sovereign. So sacred and sovereign are really the pillars for my coaching style, for the spiritual guidance and activation that I support these sensitive souls to really come back into their bodies, to be sturdy and rooted in their experience, and to know who they are, to know where they start and others start. So that way they can tell the difference between what's mine and what's theirs. So that way they're not taking on other people's drama, their baggage, other responsibilities. So they can really focus on caring for themselves and coming from a place of abundance and generosity.
When you say, I want to go back a few, a little. When you said that they, their, them is very clear, but for many people who are new to the spiritual sphere, it may need a little more explanation.
Okay, yeah, sure. I appreciate that. So it's not necessarily related to spirituality, like on what some people call the 3D plane, which is the surface that we understand for human interaction, that there's this one earth, this one reality, and we're all kind of navigating it and seeing it the way we interpret. So it's really more about gender identification, expression, and how that shows up together in terms of that. So for me, I'm non-binary, gender non-conforming women, so, but I also understand that that's a current label and container that we're using to describe an experience that someone who isn't who doesn't check the box for the stereotypical normalized accepted, society approved, rubber stamped as to this is a man and this is a woman. There's through the whole LGBT two-spirited LGBTQIA plus, we know that it's a full spectrum, and it continues to be teased apart to understand the complexity of the experience and how you really can't put people in a box is what it comes down to at the end of the day. But approaching this on a spiritual level is that, that there's no difference between me and my guides. The source that is channeled through me is infinite. And so I'm connected to a multitude of archetypes. I'm connected to a multitude of things that have shaped my reality. And so I don't stop at the reality that society prescribes for me as, my race, religion, what socioeconomic level I belong to. When you're born, as spirit, you're infinite. There's no label attached to you. And when you're born, you're given a name, you're given a family, sometimes you're given a religion. And so there's these things that are given to you to shape you. And for what I felt was to constrain me. It was a big constraint. I identified as a world citizen probably 10 years before that started being popular, and people, I'm always in the situation where they say you're ahead of your time because I use language that is descriptive to a situation, but sometimes people don't understand. So one of the invitations for me is how to, experience my reality and still keep the description of it simple, right? To keep it as simple as possible. And so for what works usually for those situations is analogy or story, parables. Because those work as the living symbol that can carry information that words are limited to.
And I understand when you say words really limit us. Because if you think of spirituality, you can go deeper and say the moment we come into life, we are breathing, and we breathe the same air in and out until we stop breathing. And that is the connection that brings us together. When you say that you are in a multi-branch, that branch isn't the right word, but I think you'll know what I mean. And you're hearing from all different levels. Are you talking about the body goes to the mind, to the intellect? Can you explain that a little clearer?
Yeah, so there's 7 subtle bodies, and each of them are having each of those layers are having a conversation, a multitude of conversations. The way that I can best describe it is it being a multiverse. So when you realize you have a concept of the world, then you more or less have a way to see the world and be in the world and have a structure that supports you, that lets you know what's an acceptable level of trust, what's safe, what is, your true north, like, how to be a good person, or whatever moral compass, if you have a moral compass, because some people are just connected to source and know that through pleasure or through play, whenever they're in a high vibrational state, that is their calling card, their invitation, and they follow that path that resonates best with them. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. I'd like to make it a little simpler for people who this is very new to. I'm beginning to understand it much better than I did before. So if someone was listening and they said, what she says, I'm hearing from all levels. Can you make it a little simpler?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I'm a foodie. I'm gonna do it this way, and then if that doesn't, the way that I understand it is another way to understand it is, so being a foodie, there's when you layer the food, there's you could taste it. Like there's a difference if you put the sauce on top versus the sauce on bottom. If the slice of cheese or meat or veggie is a certain thing, you know, like is it crispy? Is it chewy? Like there's all this texture. And as we connect this information of texture, we're able to take an energetic principle, an energetic signal, and transfer that into a matter. So a matter could even be considered a thought or a belief. And then that will manifest into speak, and the speak will create, you know, so it continues. It's taking those little slices, those snapshots of the creation process that we have as individuals. So if you identify as a co-creator, or the way that I put it, you know, sacred and sovereign, is that you can start to see how you create in the world and what is your process, and that is a world. And then the more that you start to see that in different perspectives, then you start to create your universe, and you know, your galaxy, your universe, and then it can become a multiverse. But you don't necessarily have to do any of that. You know, that's a particular learning style. That's a way of experiencing that reality. But the invitation is to know that there are things at play that we can't necessarily see, and to no longer doubt ourselves for who we are and what our gut intuition, you know, our heart intuition, our gut intuition, whatever our intuition is, to speak to us and for us to stop fighting ourselves. So it's really the invitation to stop fighting with yourself and recognize that, you know, your voice matters on the inside and out.
I know in my world, I've had a lot of experiences where if I listen to my intuition, I'm going to do better than if I hear the old thing, Carla, that can't be true. Don't trust it. How does one move from non-trust to trusting? What are ways of helping that happen?
You know, that's a really powerful question, because I just want to go ahead and peel that back so that we could really appreciate the power of the question. Is that, you know, oftentimes we get caught up in the why versus the how, and even in the how we get lost. So we can really start to make that shift from not trusting ourselves, which is tied to, you know, it has shame, guilt, right and wrong. It's, you know, it's basically judgment and the symptom of judgment that we put on ourselves, either because we have hindsight, which is the ability to see what you could have done differently, or if you had the premonition and you were able to see how that timeline could have gone that way and you still did it anyways, you know. So those are like I would say the most stereotypical ways to understand how you can pendulate in your experience of trust. But the only way to really build trust is to give yourself the ability to learn. And by giving yourself the ability to learn, you're giving yourself the ability to fail. Because if you're not putting yourself in a place where you can fail, and you actually do fail because you're stretching yourself to that point. And I want to go ahead and just like put a little break on that, you know, like pump the brakes a little bit, because sometimes you can be so like, oh, I'm going to trust, and you go beyond your intuition's capacity to be there with you, because you're out running your demons. You know, you're trying to prove it to yourself or prove it to the world. And so when you're operating from that space, it's not going to serve you. You're going to learn the lesson, but it's going to be through the shadow side. It's going to be through the side that doesn't feel very good. You have the option of learning that lesson and integrating that lesson through something that feels pretty good to you. Like you could actually have pleasure. You could experience it through love versus, you know, the opposite, hate, or the perception of hate. You know, pain versus suffering. So there's a lot of nuance, but, you know, as we understand how we are sacred and how we are sovereign and where that realm of experience lies within us, we understand what are our motivations, what is our direction, what is our purpose, and most importantly, you know, I can't overemphasize this. It really comes down to just knowing what it is your sacred yes and what is your sacred no. because we can envision ourselves as the soul within the body that we are chiseling out. So if you say yes to everything, there's not going to be anything left. You know, you're Michelangelo, I believe it's Michelangelo, chiseling David, right? Like you're creating that eternal sculpture, that work of art, that living, breathing work of art by saying no to things that are not you, that are not your energy, that are not in alignment with who you are and what you're trying to do in this world. By saying yes, again, your no gives your value, your yes value, and your yes gives a no value. Like they're equally important. And a lot of times spiritual beings are caregivers or starseeds, they're empaths or highly sensitive. They're the people that are the givers in our general society, and they're people that are takers. And it's a spectrum, right? But I'm speaking to the dominance, the proclivity to be in that state in a perpetual state. So like to always be on as the giver. And so if you're 100% on as the giver and your taking or receiving is at 0, then you're going to dry up. You're going to dry up. You need to be a healthy river with an inflow and an outflow. So you constantly need to be receiving and taking care of yourself. You know, practical self-care, spiritual care is really what it comes down to.
Many people are afraid to trust. And I have to admit, I am one of them, because I've been always told, you're a dreamer. Nothing's going to really happen. Stop dreaming, become a part of the reality. And I was actually listening to one of Abraham Hicks' talks today, where she said, okay, it's time for you to just go with what makes you feel good. And if you go with what feels good, that's what's going to come back to you. In order to do that, you need to let go of what doesn't feel good. How does one make that shift?
You know, we can explore that concept deeper, you know, like we really need to do that personal work. But I think for the purpose of this conversation, I could really invite you to imagine that you know, from as an artist, right, or as a creative, you know, if you imagine that you put this circle on this canvas, right, like almost like a mandala, right? And inside the mandala, all you can put are the things that are most sacred to you. What is sacred? Well, what gives you life? What brings life out of you, right? Like what lights you up? Where's this energy coming from? Because if we're in a situation or doing something that is out of alignment with who we are, you know, out of integrity, then we lose our energy, we lose our life force, because we become disconnected from source. Our spirit does. And so it can't send those nutrients, that life force, into our body. You know, we could imagine the body being a cell phone, and you got to connect it to source. You got to connect it to that energy supply, because that battery is not going to renew itself on its own. The only way that it's going to renew is by you being connected to things that give life to you, that bring that, you know, what I call the unconditional boundless love and light, you know. But it's really just life, whatever makes you feel happy to be here, because this experience, this life experience, or earth experience, is really meant to be this journey of finding the love for you, like to fall, not even to fall, but to be love, to feel love, to radiate love, that all aspects of who you are is love, walking around in your, you know, in your earth suit, in your birthday suit.
If that is the case, and I'm really not attacking you on this, I'm just trying to make it clear for not only the audience, but for me, if we are love, And I believe we are. I believe deep in our hearts that's where we are. How can we get back to that source for those who have forgotten? And many have forgotten. They were there as a child, but now that they're adults, it's like, oh no, I have to worry about the money coming in, or oh no, I need to worry about X, Y, and Z. Does that person really like me? And yet inside of you, you're feeling love for everyone.
If you are feeling that love inside of everyone, then the invitation is to continuously connect to it, because that is the source. And by drawing your attention, your awareness to it, you are channeling your energy and your focus to it. And so then you're going to make the decision. You're invited, like right now, you're invited, Carla, and the community to say, I choose to see and be love in this world. I choose to experience it deeply. I choose to be surprised by the universe in the places that it shows up and how it shows up, and and who is the bearer of that message. I welcome that. Every single aspect of me welcomes that. And that's an agreement that you make with the universe. It's an agreement that you make with yourself. And when you align yourself to that agreement, you're going to get the answer. You're going to get to see love. You're going to get to see how the universe shows up for you.
Why does the universe decide to show up for me, but not someone nearby? They always feel, oh, I'm not good enough, or I'm not where I want to be.
Yeah, I would tweak that question, because the universe shows up for everyone. It's simply our ability to perceive it that makes all the difference. Perspective makes all the difference. It's the lens. If you choose to see what's wrong, you're going to see what's wrong. That's where your attention is going to go. That's where energy flows. If you choose to see how everything is working out, in your highest favor, then you're going to see how everything works out. That's the channel that you're tuning into. That's the frequency that matters most to you. And the universe just gives you what you want.
But aren't we completely connected to the universe, so that would just happen automatically? Well, yet there are people in the world who do not feel connected.
So can you ask that question again? Because I'm hearing. I think I'd just rather have you ask the question again, if you can.
I'm curious what you're hearing.
Okay. I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing that if the universe gives us what we want, and I don't mean this in like, oh my God, I want a car, and then like, boom, where's the genie? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what is our psyche, our spirit, our body, like what is all who we are that constitutes the reality of us. What is that agreement? What is the reality that's playing out? Like how am I casting myself as a character, and what is the story that is being written? Right? So those are two powerful questions to ask yourself. Is that, I shared this earlier in a different, I was on an Instagram live talking about my program that starts November 16th, which is, live your sacred life. That is the invitation, right? Like I channeled that name because it's an invitation. Everything that I do is in alignment with what energy am I connecting to? How am I manifesting that as my reality, my belief system, who I am, and how am I sharing this with others? Is it an invitation for them too? They can say yes and they can say no, and there's no right and there's no wrong. It's simply, is this energy that they want to connect to? Is this a reality that they want to manifest? Right? And so that's the invitation of, of how I do my magical marketing or manifestation, is that, there's that intention of being vulnerable, of being open, and having done my work so that way I can create a sacred space for people to find their sovereign, to embody their sovereign and their sacred in their experience, to be fully connected to source. Because you can perceive that you're not connected, and that shapes your reality, but that's not going to actually disconnect you from source. It's only the reality that you're living based on your perception.
Now, I do believe this is true, but I'm playing devil's advocate for a moment. If this is true, why is there so much stress in the world or distress in the world right now? If everyone can create their own universe, and maybe that's the key to my answer right now.
Yeah.
Why are there people who create very negative universes?
It's it's funny. I don't label it as negative, right? Like I did for a very long time, but I realized in order for it to be negative, there has to be a good. And in order for there to be a good, there has to be a yes-no structure, which is non-choice, right? Because free will is your yes-no as you go down your forks in the road, right? But where I would go with that is simply. Oh, it's so funny because I'm following this fork in the road thought, and there's still this need to like go back to your question, because there's something really juicy there. There's something about yeah, I mean, I think it's really just the invitation, and I always call it an invitation because, I was sharing earlier that all triggers are reminders, but not all reminders are triggers. And so you can substitute reminders for invitation. So there's triggers, which is pain and suffering. There's reminders, which is spiritually awake and recognizing that we're co-creators. And then there's invitation, right? So then there's more, but just to have a simple concept, is that when you move from triggers to invitation, that's light years of difference. You're not in the same realm. You're not in the same vibration. You're not the same person. But when we're in those transient states, we experience the disconnect and we feel the pressure and the stress, is because we're still connected to the past. All the mistakes, all the shoulda, woulda, couldas, and all that stuff is kind of like pulling you back. So, through my work is that I help them to have that closure, to create a ceremony and a ritual that honors their life experience, processes what needs to be processed, looks at what needs to be looked at, and to disconnect from those energies and release them to be transmuted into a new reality. And so that's how we create these new universes. That's how we create new timelines. That's how we create, the infinite possibilities of you.
Can we say, after listening to what you just said, there are many, many people in the world, and everyone creates their own universe. So can we say that on this planet alone, there are many universes created throughout the planet?
Yeah, and the way that I put it is interdimensional multiverse. So not only is it a universe, but it's a multiverse, and in that multiverse, there's many dimensions. And that's simply because that's at the limit of the current construct of being able to experience how everything changes from energy to matter and matter back to energy, and what is our relationship to the I, and what does that mean about my reality as to who I am and where I'm going and what this life is all about.
And could that be why we have so much struggle and there's joy and so much diversity? I look at the world as one big garden, and every flower, every person is a flower or a vegetable or whatever. And somehow we all, support each other, although we don't know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when we look at the world with this diversity, then the world itself changes tremendously.
When we can appreciate the diversity, that's when the world changes. Yeah.
I mean, there's that whole thing that we create what we want in the world, whether we want to admit to it or not.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, 100%. And what's coming to me is kind of, Gaia, Mother Earth, and how, all of her creatures, human, fauna and flora, right? Everything was in existence. Everything had its harmony, like, because there was majority nature. And then we have dominated and forced ourselves onto her, and have obliterated and desolated the land, by not showing respect, by not being in relationship with the land, not appreciating that. And so, yeah, if, in my club, the Space to Speak Up, I call it, the cosmic garden, because we are planting seeds there that ripples out into the multiverse interdimensionally. And so how I show up and what journey I take to be here, like, for example, with you, I had to do a fair amount of self-care, because, I'm showing up on deeper levels for a larger community. I'm closing tons of karmic cycles daily, if not like minute by minute, because I operate multidimensionally or interdimensionally. So I have my lifelines, my versions of me that are running continuously, because my goal for my life is that when I interact with another human being or another soul, is that they walk away feeling that unconditional love and light, even if it was for the first time, right? And so that's an intention of a frequency that I radiate, that I cultivate, so that when I show up into the space, I'm able to be present 100%, or as close to what my 100% at that time looks like.
Wow. I mean, I have been meditating for many years, and I'm just getting into this whole idea of manifestation. But it's been around for many, many years. You could go back into the scriptures and find that, the Indian scriptures, any Bible or any type of script, holy book talks about this. And yet people are so afraid. And I'm wondering why.
There's a lot of answers to that why. But if you were to make it the most simple, it would have to come down to fear, right? Fear or faith. Faith goes into trust, goes into divine timing, goes into alignment with, the universe is a friendly place and it's working out for my higher good. And there's a lot of different branches to that tree and that forest, that ecosystem. And the other opposite is the polar opposite, because we live in a dualistic state. So we're either aligning to how we are growing, or we are feeling constrained and we're contracting. So we're either expanding or contracting. And sometimes the contraction and expanding is necessary because we're expelling things, like you could think of your stomach, letting go of the food that you ate, and then you're expelling what no longer serves you. So there's a necessary contraction because that invites you in. But if you're so afraid of the contraction that you're no longer going to expand, then you're going to stay balled up in a very stuck state. And depending on where that state is, it might be a very painful place that can feel impossible to get out of. And the truth is that you're able to outgrow pretty much every pattern that has ever shown up within you, if you're willing to live one, right? Like that's a requirement. You have to choose to be here. You have to choose to be in your body, to experience this reality. Yeah.
It's just, we think it's so simple, and on one hand it is, but on another hand it's very complicated, and it's infinite because it involves so many different personalities and ways of life. It's quite amazing.
It really is. It's we're seeing the universe speak to itself, engage with itself, right? And that's the cosmic level of experiencing it. The difficulty part is that one, choosing to live is not easy. I mean, I'm gonna raise my hand and say there's times where I wanted to check the box and be like, I'm ready, I'm done, let's do something else, right? And that's a very painful place to be. So I want to be very sensitive and understanding and compassionate to that very tender, vulnerable place that we go, and we can either have a tendency to get stuck there because that's the only experience that makes sense, or we can get tired of going back and forth between that state and another state, and it could feel like, am I ever going to get off this hamster wheel? So, and then on the flip side of that, there's okay, I fell, I bumped my knee, or I got hurt, I put a cast on. Like there's this, there's these spiritual broken bones that we believe are going to heal, and we go through the healing process. And while we experience the pain, we know that by doing these exercises and doing these things that will support us, we will not only, that bone will be functional again, but we will heal and we'll be able to operate in this world like we did, if not better, because now we learned something new.
How cool. And with that, what would you like to leave our audience with?
So thank you, Carla. So I give people the opportunity to book a free Flow with Grace and Ease sacred session. It's 45 minutes where we explore, what is your current reality? Where are some opportunities that you could experience flow, and to experience flow with grace and ease, because sometimes the flow can feel really threatening, or we can have resistance to it, and so we can't even enjoy the ride. So that's the offering that I would like to share with your community, and just an invitation to join me if they're interested in learning more about sacred space and sovereign speaking, which is really the foundation for all of this work, to be able to not only understand it here, but to take that message to the heart and to radiate it through, so that way you're embodying that message on all the layers and realities of you, to live sacred and sovereignly in this world, to have a position of empowerment and of purpose, and most importantly, to be able to channel joy, love, and play in your life, and to see this life not only as a miracle, but as a marvelous adventure to experience the infinite possibilities of you. And so, so the workshop is on Saturday, October 16th, at 3 p.m. Central, and it's on my link tree at Carly Grace Coaching.
Great. Thank you so much for spending time with me tonight. And thank you for the audience, whoever has been watching or will watch at a later date. I feel honored that you took the time with me, and we shall, hopefully we'll talk again. And I want to remind people that this show has been sponsored by the Institute of Peace, which wants to create or promote peace one conversation at a time. Can we wave goodbye? Bye, everyone.
Bye. Infinite gratitude.